Hey guys, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I am Rick.
And I'm Kristin.
And we are back with our False Flag series. You guys have been waiting for this. We've been waiting for this. So much research and time and energy and effort has gone into this, and we're so excited to start the first part of a 3-part series on the JFK assassination. That's right. Those of you that are old enough to know, there was a president that we had. He was president number 35. His name was John F. Kennedy, and he was assassinated. It really changed things in our nation, right? It really changed things. And as we get into this false flag series, we're going to do what we always do. And we're going to say, we know that in false flags that a lot of times there's a lot of casualties. Well, in this false flag, there was actually only 2. And those 2 casualties were John F. Kennedy and Tippit, a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tippit. And so having such a low body count, people start to say, is this really a false flag? Is this something? And we have to remember that it's not the amount of bodies, right? It's not it has to do with the bait and switch that we've talked about in this false flag series up until this point, right? The bait and switch of saying it was this person that did it when it was actually this person that did it, if that makes sense to you guys out there. So Kristin's done lots of work, as always, on this series. She's been putting in the time.
You've done a lot this time, too. This is a big one, guys. This is a big one because there's so much to it. And Rick already name dropped the other guy that we're going to talk about later. But it wasn't just Kennedy that was killed this day. So, but that's something that we're going to go into when we go down to the, discrepancies category. But we're going to start with kind of the official narrative. Like we like to start with, this is the story that they've given America, and then we'll get into some of the discrepancies and why that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and we'll say before we get into the meat and potatoes of the official narrative, a lot of us know the official narrative, right? We've either seen a documentary or a movie or we knew it from growing up. But how much do we really
paid attention in school, which I did not. So
right. How much do we really remember about this whole incident and what all went down and the names and the timestamps and all those different things? Those are the things we didn't really pay attention to because you're just seeing it on TV. You move along with your life. I mean, obviously, it was a big deal back then for the people. They watched their president die on national TV, and we'll get into that. But we just need to remember that, back then there was a lot going on in the world. There was a lot. People were scared about nuclear weapons. They were scared about this whole state of the world. You got communism on the rise, all those things. So as we get into this narrative, we're going to continue to go back and paint the picture of the world as it was then, because a lot of that context really makes sense only in the context of this story. We have to make sure that we keep everything in the context, because if we try to think about this assassination from our vantage point today, it's not going to make that much sense. So lots to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into it with Kristin laying out the official narrative for you.
Laying it out.
Let's lay it out.
So, like Rick said, on November 22nd, 1963 was the day John F. Kennedy, who was the 35th president of the United States, was assassinated. He was riding in a presidential motorcade through Dealey Plaza, which is in Dallas, Texas. It's like a area they very purposely did it through there so that people could come out and see him, and he would get a lot of, FaceTime or whatever you want to call it. So he's in the vehicle with his wife, Jacqueline. He's also in there with Texas Governor John Connally and Connally's wife, Nellie. And then they had, the driver and they were Secret Service in the front seats, right?
Yes, the other 2 Secret Service agents.
Yes. So there was a six people in the car, and it was like a convertible. I'm not sure what kind of car it was, but it was
It was an open top Lincoln.
Yeah. So they essentially flew into Dallas, got in that car, and like went straight to this, motorcade route that they had published ahead of time where it was going to drive through. They had like really highly publicized And we'll get into some of this later when Rick gives you a little bit of politically what was going on. But they really publicized that he was going to be there this day, this route. They wanted people to come out and show support. So the official narrative says that former Marine Lee Harvey Oswald was positioned in the Texas School Book Depository building, which overlooked the Dealey Plaza, and that's kind of where he supposedly was shooting from. So like we said, we have a ton in this series that we're going to go over. So Rick's going to work his magic and put some pictures on for you later on, probably in part 2 and part 3. We don't really need to probably do it in this one. So if you're not watching on Spotify or your YouTube, go somewhere where you can watch the video, because he's going to have some pictures and some graphics up there that's going to help. But we'll explain it the best we can, because we know it's just a podcast.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to understand the scope of the story when you don't really understand directionally where things are coming from and stuff like that. So yeah, and being able to see those things is good.
High-rise buildings in this area. And then there was this place that you'll hear, time and time again, called the Grassy Knoll, which is kind of just like a grassy area. And then there's a park right on the other side. So it's kind of a little bit of everything. There's an overpass, there's just a lot going on in this one little area. So the motorcade. So essentially what happened is Lee Harvey Oswald shoots what they later identify as three bullets, three whatever rounds. Projectiles. So he shoots those out of that Texas School Book Depository building, which he actually worked at. He was employed there. So Kennedy gets shot, which we'll go into the forensics of that a little bit too later. But then the motorcade then rushes to Parkland Memorial, ended up being pronounced dead about 30 minutes after he was shot. Connolly, who was that governor, the Texas governor that was in the car, he actually was wounded also, but he recovered. But he was treated at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. So he was the vice president at the time, and he was sworn in as president later that day. Like, we're talking not very long after Kennedy was dead, he was getting sworn in. Like, it was kind of surreal how fast it happened, actually.
Yeah, the timeline of this whole situation is going to be one to really pay attention to. So the shots started to ring out around 12:30 on the dot, and this is where the first injuries began to sustain, and from there we were on the clock. And so just remember that as we go through this, because Kennedy is pronounced dead at 1 o'clock, which as Kristin said is 30 minutes later, but he was actually dead 10 minutes before that. So really at 12:55 or 12:50, I think it was around 12:50, he was actually pronounced dead, but then they didn't reveal it to the public for another 10 minutes because they wanted to get Lyndon B. Johnson, or at least the story goes, they wanted to get Lyndon B. Johnson on the plane and get him out of there because he was really wanting to get going.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know what other threats there were. I mean,
right. They didn't know the scope of the whole thing yet. So after the assassination, Oswald he returned home and he grabbed a pistol, and then he shot and killed a Dallas police officer. That was J.D. Tippit. Shortly after he goes home, gets the pistol. And then it was only 70 minutes after Kennedy and Connolly were shot that Oswald was apprehended by the Dallas Police Department.
That's some good police work.
In charge at that point. I mean, that's a really fast turnaround.
Isn't
70 minutes.
It's like ridiculous almost how fast.
Like, thinking about it now, it's like, even with all the forensic stuff that we have that like at our fingertips, cell phones and computers and Facebook Lives and all kinds of stuff, like even that 70 minutes back then, that was a really fast turnaround to find this guy and not just find him, but charge him. Yeah.
When you even had, reporters that were saying it was kind of a whirlwind, like they were actually shocked at how fast this investigation or lack thereof had happened. Yeah. Yeah. It was
definitely. And if you go back, there's, lots of documentaries you can watch, but if you go back and watch some of the footage of the news people, you can tell they're just like they're shook. You know, they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this just happened. It was like so crazy.
Yeah, you have to think that this is the first time that somebody's been murdered essentially
on television,
on live television.
Yeah,
I mean, this is 1963. The television is a basic concept still, really, at this point. But it was the screens aren't that great.
Like people even went to like stores like Sears and J.C. Penney's and these big box stores that had TVs, because they put this on, like, because a lot of people didn't have a TV in their home yet. But it was such a big deal that they were like gathering in areas, gathering in, in gyms and all kinds of stuff so they could watch this, because it was such a cool thing to get to, just see your president on TV, but especially live, driving through your town. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So on November 24th, 1963, at 11:21 a.m., they have live television cameras going. They're covering Oswald, who's being moved through the basement of the Dallas police headquarters, and he is fatally shot by Dallas nightclub operator Jack Ruby. And this guy's kind of a weird character.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into him much because there's just too much information, but it was a very odd thing. So that, like Kennedy, Oswald was then, he's shot. So then they take him to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where he also died. And then Ruby ended up being convicted of Oswald's murder, but the decision was overturned on appeal. Okay. So he gets they overturn it and they're like, okay, never mind. We don't have the stuff we needed. But Ruby ends up dying in prison in 1967 while he's awaiting a new trial.
Suspicious.
Yeah, so he ends up dying in prison, essentially before he could get his second trial even started.
I mean, it's also very suspicious that the dude, files an appeal and ends up winning. Like, what does that say for,
right,
where you get this appeal and you actually get another? That tells you that the case that they had against him in the beginning was
weak,
shoddy at best. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was the other scene that I'm sure you guys, if you've watched anything on JFK, you've seen this clip of Oswald, and he's right after he's arrested, and he says, I'm a patsy. I'm just a patsy. And everybody's like, whatever, they just took it like hook, line, and sinker. And if you know anything about, mental, emotional warfare type stuff, the first story that they put out is what people are going to remember the most. So it doesn't matter. Nobody reads retractions. They put retractions on page 12 of the newspaper, and nobody is reading that far. Nobody is going to read that later on, oh, whoops, this whole thing was overturned or whatever, because they're going to remember the first story that you told them right after you traumatized them. So you traumatize them by killing their president, and then you tell them this story, and this is what takes root in somebody's mind. This is how this whole thing works. So,
I mean, this is almost exactly like they did for 9/11, right? The news was already telling you what the official narrative was.
Yeah, the building was standing in the background when they said it was falling down.
Right. But in this case, there's so many reporters there, first of all, because this is such a huge event. I mean, this was a massive parade. If you've seen any video of this, if you haven't, go back and look at, find it on YouTube or whatever. There was massive crowds of people all along this parade route. It was incredible.
To remind me, this was right about the time that he was going to begin his re-election campaign, correct? So he was just ramping up to get started with his re-election campaign. So that was part of why this was such a big deal. And we're going to get into in a little bit, I promise. But there was some political stuff that was going on that was weird. So we'll come back to that in just a little bit. So there was a 10-month investigation, and then the Warren Commission, the Warren Commission concluded that Oswald assassinated Kennedy, and that there was no evidence that either Oswald or Ruby were part of a conspiracy. Yeah,
interesting.
That definitely wouldn't happen.
Why would it?
Even though Kennedy's assassination is still the subject of widespread debate, obviously, it's still being debated and has spawned many, 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 many conspiracy theories and alternative scenarios. Polls found that a majority of Americans believed that there was a conspiracy. So most people in America knew that something wasn't adding up, but they didn't have access to the World Wide Web. They didn't have access to podcasts and videos and all kinds of stuff because it was before all this technology had taken off. So they believed what the newspaper said, even though they knew that it stunk. Like they knew that there was something in there that was not right. The majority of Americans, by the end of that 10-month investigation, believed that there was a conspiracy of some kind. They just didn't know what.
It's kind of like the 2020 election, right? It's like all of the Americans, all of the people in America are like, something smells about this whole situation, and we don't like it, and we would like to investigate it, but it gets pushed away. Like, no, you guys are crazy. Yeah. But this is like the mother of all conspiracy theories.
Right. And the other weird thing that I don't know how many people have, connected all of this, but the assassination came at a time where it was like extra impactful because it was the first of 4 like major assassinations during the 60s that happened. So you had JFK started it off, then you had Malcolm X in 1965, and then 5 years before, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and then Kennedy's brother Robert was assassinated in 1968. So all this, there's 4 of these like high profile assassinations all in 1 year. So if that doesn't scream programming, then you guys should probably turn the dial up a little bit because you're not hearing me. This is programming, one after the other after the other. They traumatized you, re-traumatized you, re-traumatized you, and re-traumatized you to the 4th degree with all of these. And it was done very purposeful. And if, like I said, if you've studied any type of, mental warfare, this is typical.
Yeah, it's a psyop for sure. To be able to program a brain, you need that trauma, right? How many of those murders were televised out of the 4?
I don't know. I didn't look into that.
It just came to me.
Worth looking into, though. If anybody out there wants to do some more super sleuthing, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So we've got JFK going to a town where a lot of people would say is mostly in support of him, obviously by the turnout, the amount of people that were there. So it was almost a shock and awe campaign.
Middle America. I mean, it's like,
just based on the location, right? They picked a certain location, because we're going to come down to it, right? At the end of this, where we're all going to find out that we believe it's a conspiracy. Duh. Right. We believe, like, spoiler alert, we're going to get to that.
If most Americans in the 60s believed it was a conspiracy, I think we've done some progression since then.
Yeah, and I mean, up until this point, a lot of people don't realize that, if you haven't been paying attention, like there's some people out there that have gone, I mean, this is one of, as we said, this is the mother of all conspiracy theories. There's so many people that have researched this. There's so many people out there that have podcasts that are just dedicated to this. And you could probably learn so much about this, but the reason that we're doing it is because we want it to be under this umbrella of false flag, where we understand that there's lots of this happening, and it's all happening by our government, and there's a reason why it happens, and there's a very distinct reason. If you go into this a little bit deeper, which we are going to, you'll find that this was very much orchestrated, and and that
all these false flags have a political tilt. I mean, they all changed the climate of politics in some fashion. So it wasn't just big, terrible murder events. They then, what's the saying? Never let a good tragedy go to waste. They then took that tragedy and ended up changing the climate politically.
Oh, yeah.
So let's do a little bit of, I don't want to spend a ton of time on Lee Harvey Oswald, but just to give you a little bit of a background. So again, when you start seeing, it was like, okay, so when I was growing up, I had a Sunday school teacher, and she would always say, if you see themes in the Bible that they keep talking about over and over and over again, you should probably pay attention, because those are things that are important. So this is the same idea of, if you keep seeing things being repeated. So Lee Harvey Oswald was in the military. He was a Marine. He was born in 1939. He ended up serving in Japan and in the Philippines, and he was actually a big proponent of communism. So after accidentally shooting his elbow with an unauthorized handgun and fighting an officer, he ends up being court-martialed twice and then demoted. And that's what they call a dependency discharge after claiming his mother was disabled. So my mom's disabled. I need out. Send me home. So what they do, right? So I can take care of her. So then he ended up defecting to the Soviet Union. And in 1960, he's living over there and he begins working at a factory. And then he meets his wife, Marina Pruskova. She's got an odd last name, but I'm assuming that's how you say it. And then they end up having one child. So he has one kid. So then in 1962, which I don't know if his mom was with him in the Soviet Union, because if he got out of the military to take care of his mom, but then he took off to the Soviet Union, something doesn't seem right there, but I'm not exactly sure.
It almost seems like he was wanting to get out of the military. Right. It's like he was trying to escape
something frightened him, maybe? I don't know.
Because I don't know how a person shoots themselves in the elbow. I mean,
right. With a handgun he wasn't even supposed to have. So first of all, he would know the rules of what he was supposed to have and what he wasn't supposed to have. And then
I would like to see the situation in which a person shoots themselves in the elbow. This is such a, like, how?
You can't make this stuff up. Right. And then he gets in a fight with an officer, which, if you get in a fight with an officer, you're going to be court-martialed. Could be.
For those of you that are watching, is this how it goes?
Maybe he leaned on it and then, I don't know.
But
it's better than shooting yourself in some other areas that people typically have holsters in. So
it's true.
Elbow is probably your
so he's kind of on the outs. He doesn't like the military, apparently. He wants to get out. He wants to be a communist. It almost
makes me wonder if, he uncovered something. Did he see something? Did he become part of a group that he, I don't know. I really don't know. But it does seem like he was trying, quick, fast, and in a hurry to get out of the military. And then he ends up going to the Soviet Union because he loves communism so much. I don't know.
There's a lot of conspiracy stuff surrounding him, because a lot of people say, and I think it can be proven now, is that he never even worked at that book depository. Right. He never actually worked there.
He was not a documented employee there.
Yeah, and those are some of the discrepancies that we're going to get into. But this is how weird this situation is, right? Is when you
we're only on page 2 of the notes, and we've already got all these red flags. Like, whoa!
And this is why it's a conspiracy, and nobody in America believes it. Is because it's like nothing makes any sense. The dude didn't even work there, and he's a communist, and now he's going. It's like, what is happening here?
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into.
So in 1962, he ends up coming back to the United States with what they call a repatriation loan. Sorry, I really butchered that one.
I liked it.
But it's basically a loan that you get from the U.S. Embassy, and so if you're in a foreign country and you need to go home, they will give you a loan if you go down to the U.S. Embassy, they'll give you a loan to get home. But then as soon as you get home, they'll pay for your flight and, your hotel or whatever. But then as soon as you get home, that loan starts and you have to repay it. So this is I don't know if they still do that, but essentially if you're stranded in a, foreign country, you can go to the embassy and they would give you this repatriation loan to come back home. So in 1962, he does that, comes back to the United States. And then, let's see. I don't think that we need to go.
I just don't know why what's your credit score have to be in order to get a repatriation?
I know.
Do they?
I don't even know if they do them anymore, but it was a big deal back then because, we had soldiers over, they leave. And then if whatever happens and they end up getting out or they end up needing to come home, we had a lot of people stranded in other countries at that time because travel just wasn't as easy as it is now. So then in April of 1963, he goes back to his birthplace, which was New Orleans, and he ended up establishing an independent chapter of it was a pro-Castro Fair Play for Cuba committee, of which he was the sole member. So he makes an independent chapter of this. I know.
He's like a one-man band.
But he's the only member. He's still waiting for his friends to show up.
He's like, we got breakfast burritos and coffee in the back if anybody's interested.
Mm-hmm. So then, this was one of the, and I only bring that up because this was one of the few things that, popped up on his record while he was passing out this pro-Castro literature. He ends up getting arrested after kind of getting into a little scuffle with the anti-Castro Cuban exile group. So he ends up gets arrested for that. And then in September of 1963, he goes to Mexico City, where, according to the Warren Commission, he visited the Soviet and Cuban embassies. So nobody really knows, you're not privy to that information, apparently, of what he was doing, talking with the Soviet and Cuban embassies. But again, this screams, I don't want to be in America. I don't want to be part of America anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they were, leading him in this direction or leading the paper trail in this direction to make it sound like he was just a crazy, wanted to defect from the United States entirely. I'm not exactly sure, but those are kind of his footprints before the day of what happened. So then on October 3rd of 1963, he ends up returning to Dallas, and according to the official narrative, he finds work at the Texas School Book Depository, which is in Dealey Plaza. So during the work week, supposedly, he lived separately from his wife, Marina, and he was essentially staying at like a Dallas rooming house. And so I'm not exactly sure where she was, and I really didn't care to go down that rabbit trail. But he's living in this Dallas rooming house during the week by himself. On the morning of the assassination, he carried a long package, which he told his coworkers contained curtain rods. So he shows up to work. His coworkers are like, "What's in the bag?" Because it's this big, long bag, which, whatever. I think he would know how to break down a weapon and probably get it in a little easier. But he's like, "Oh, it's just a bag of curtain rods," and just takes that into the depository. And so the Warren Commission ended up concluding that this package is what contained Oswald's rifle. So that's how he got it in there.
Yeah, you're going to keep hearing this Warren Commission over and over and over again. And just to get that out of the way, this is a commission of guys that were appointed to by Lyndon B. Johnson. It was a executive order right after the assassination of Kennedy to set up this commission, and it wasn't initially called the Warren Commission. It's called something else, but that's what everybody knows it as today, because the guy, the chair, the guy that was heading it was his last name was Warren, and so that's why they call it the Warren Commission. So this executive order put all that into motion, and a lot of the information that we have from this investigation is from that Warren Commission. So you have to take into account, where did they get that information? Are they getting it from the FBI? Are they getting it from local sources? Are they getting it from eyewitness account? All of those different things, which it all, is laid out where they got it in the Warren Commission. But that's where a lot of the discrepancies come from, is also the Warren Commission's official document, because it's just shady as all get out. So anyway, for those of you that may not understand the scope of what we're talking about when we say Warren Commission, that's what we're talking about.
Right. Yep. So I don't really want to talk about Oswald anymore, because there's going to be more stuff on him later when we get into the discrepancies and stuff. But so let's just move on a little bit to the day of. So the motorcade had a 10-mile route that was going through Dallas. And it was basically, like we said, to give him maximum exposure to the crowds, because it was such a cool thing. So, and he'll put on some stuff.
For the top to be off. That was actually him that wanted.
And there was another convertible behind them that had a more. There was four. I think there was 4 motorcycle police officers, Dallas police officers, and then there was another convertible behind that had other people obviously in it. So they go down Main Street in downtown Dallas, and then they turn right onto Houston Street. So if you guys want to look it up, or Rick can flash it on the screen or whatever, that we have some drawings of it, or there, it's really easy to find. Just type in the JFK route on the assassination day.
Yeah.
So he turns right onto Houston Street. Yeah, Dealey Plaza, Dealey, I believe Dealey. Yeah. Okay. So they turn onto Houston Street and then go another block, and then the motorcade was supposed to turn left onto Elm Street, pass through Dealey Plaza, and then they were going to do a really short segment of the Stemmons Freeway, and then head back to the Trademark. That was the route that was planned. And like I said, it was in the newspaper, and people did bring up hey, I don't know that we should be saying what the route of the president is as he's driving through town.
Yeah.
This doesn't seem, there was people that were concerned that there might be hostile protesters or, what have you, which rightfully so.
Especially the Secret Service. I would think that they would be saying something about that.
You would think. And, Rick's going to get into some of the political climate in a little bit, but there was an incident, it was a month earlier, where let's see, Kennedy's UN ambassador, last name is Stevenson. So he had been spit on by in Dallas a month earlier. So people were rightfully a little concerned about the route being so highly publicized.
Sure.
And then Rick said, the Kennedy limousine enters Dealey Plaza at 12:30. Nellie Connolly, so she turns and comments to Kennedy, who is sitting behind her. She says, "Mr. President, they can't make you believe now that there are not some in Dallas who love and appreciate you, can they?" So it was kind of a flippant, jokey, people thought that you weren't going to be accepted down here or whatever. And look at how many supporters you have.
Yeah.
So then Kennedy replies to her, "No, they sure can't." And those were his last words. Were spoken to Nellie Connolly. So from Houston Street, the limousine made the planned left turn onto Elm, and then they were passing by the book depository. As they continued down Elm Street, multiple shots were fired. They can't. So this is the official narrative, guys. Remember. So this number, I highly don't believe to be accurate. But they said, out of the interviews, 80% of the witnesses recalled hearing 3 shots. And that was it. Ooh, I just hit my microphone. Sorry, guys. So they only reported hearing 3 shots.
Yeah.
So, and witness interviews, especially right after a traumatic thing like this, you can lead a witness down whatever trail you want to lead them down in the aftermath of something this traumatic. But that's the official narrative. 80% of them all heard 3 shots.
According to the Warren Commission. Right. Okay.
Yes. And then they said there was 1 big shot, and then there was 2 others that were, bunched together. So shortly after Kennedy began waving, some witnesses heard the first gunshot. There was actually very few people in the crowd or the motorcade that even reacted, honestly, because there was so much, cheering and fanfare, and, people were excited, and they thought that it was kind of the same thing. If you go back, here's another running theme, is chaos, right? So like at the Vegas shooting, people thought it was firecrackers or a car backfiring, or,
right.
Your mind will make up all of these things that you heard to essentially to protect you from what you really heard, which was you just heard your president get shot, right? So they think it's a firecracker or a backfire or whatever. So then within 1 second of each other, Governor Connolly and Mrs. Kennedy turned abruptly from their left to their right. So obviously, whether they heard the shot or not, because it's not really clear from any of them whether they heard the shots or not, obviously there was aftermath, right? So it only takes them 1 second independently that makes me think that they probably didn't hear the shot. They probably either, not to be gruesome, but, Jacqueline Kennedy had brain matter. She
Well, the
had
first,
blood. They had stuff on them. And then obviously Connolly had been shot himself.
mhm. Yeah, the
So
first shot that happens is, or the first reaction that you see, if you watch the Zapruder film, which we're going to get into, obviously, but there are several shots that happen, and several reactions that Kennedy has. One of the major ones that he has is when he puts his hands up to his neck. For those of you that are watching, he puts his hands up to his neck with his elbows really high. And that's the first indication that something has happened differently. And I don't know if he, obviously I wasn't in the car, but who knows if he let out a moan or a really weird sound. Obviously, if you just got shot
probably,
in the neck.
I mean, if it hit him right here at the base, it would have probably gone through part of his voice box, which would have probably made a very odd sound. It would have been it probably would have been a screechy, high pitched sound of some kind. And then
losing,
a lot of times
you would be losing air.
Right. It would be like a hissing, probably would be my assumption. I've had patients, obviously being a nurse, that have had a, like a trach, and it makes a weird sound sometimes. Like, especially if you are introducing liquid to it, like blood and other stuff. So it probably made a sound. And then obviously the governor is then shot pretty quickly afterwards. So I don't know. It would have just been, and then it would have just been chaos, I'm sure, in everybody's mind.
Yeah, you realize that when Jacqueline looks over, she's trying to kind of, it's almost like she's inquisitive, like what's wrong? Like it's not really that big of a deal, except for the fact that he can't talk, and he can't really give any indication other than his arms just being up in the air, almost
and
like he's choking.
He can't breathe like your normal inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. When you've got a trach, you're using different muscles in your chest actually to do some of that. So it would have just been a very foreign, terrible feeling. So then later on, Connolly did testify that he could not see Kennedy. So he started to turn, because he actually, Connolly did say that he heard the sound of what he thought was a rifle. So he turns from his right to his left and said he couldn't really see what was going on. So he turned his head and was facing, like, according to him, 20 degrees left of center. He was struck in his upper right back by a shot, and that he did not hear that one. And then he shouted, "My God, they're going to kill us all." So that was McConnelly's reaction, right after. And then again, according to the Warren Commission, Kennedy was waving to the crowds and he was shot. Okay, this is the fun part, Rick. You're not going to explode yet.
Nope.
He was shot, entered his upper back, and exited his throat just beneath his larynx. Okay. So this is the official narrative. Keep that in mind, because that's going to come into play big time later on. And at that point is when he raised his elbows, kind of clenched his fist in front of his face and neck. And then he leaned forward and kind of to the left. And then Mrs. Kennedy, who's facing him, put her arms around him, because he kind of, fell forward at that point a little bit. And she was kind of, I think, trying to, like, what's going on, trying to figure it out.
He's probably going into shock, and from the bullet to the throat, and he can't breathe. And so he's probably wide-eyed, struggling to breathe at this point, and she's trying to not only figure out what's going on, but he's probably knows in his mind that he's been shot. And so he's probably trying to get down a little bit, and moving towards her. And she had
just heard, "My God, they're trying to kill us all." So obviously at that point, it's just chaos, but she knows kind of what's going on. So this would have been a serious wound, obviously coming through his back and coming out his larynx, but it probably in all likelihood would have been survivable because of where it was. He would have still been able to get oxygen. It would have been difficult, and it would have been terrifying, I'm sure. And but he would have still been able to get oxygen at that point. So it probably would have been survivable, but it would have been obviously a very serious but not a mortal wound. So then there's this whole, which Rick, you can probably get into, but the Warren Commission has this single bullet theory. So, it's also called the magic bullet theory. So whichever, they're kind of interchangeable, but they say this was a term come up by conspiracy theorists. Governor Connally was injured by the same bullet that exited Kennedy's neck, which we will get into why that doesn't make any sense. But that's what they said, was there was this magic bullet that somehow went through Kennedy, bounced through there, and then it came out the larynx and then moved, inches over this way. And the forensics of it don't line up. But this is so if you hear single bullet theory or magic bullet theory, that's what they're
this whole idea came from this guy named Arian Specter. He was a staffer in the Warren Commission, and it was his bright idea. This guy had to be a physics genius in order to come up with this idea that this bullet made 90-degree angles to be able to fly and make all of this stuff happen. Obviously, this didn't happen. Anybody that knows their way around a rifle or around bullets or anything like that, we know that this didn't happen. However, for the official narrative, this is a staffer by the name of Arian Specter. This is what
we're going with for now.
Who claims that this is how this happened. And they actually have a bullet. And I'll put this on the screen right now. And there is going to be a magic bullet that you see right now. And the thing that you're going to find about this magic bullet is it's fully intact. Isn't that so lucky that they were able to retrieve the entire bullet after it just took 90-degree angles through several bones, shattering certain people's bones throughout this travel of flight. And they were lucky enough to find it fully intact after all of that. Man, I think
they found it on the gurney. Was it on the gurney? It
was just kind of laying there.
It was just kind of laying there.
It kind of just fell
fully
out.
Intact bullet.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Well, the weird thing
according to the narrative.
Let's just be real here. I can't with this. If you
this one really gets Rick.
If you find it on the stretcher, right? Whose stretcher did we find it on? They say Kennedy's, right? They say they found it on Kennedy's stretcher. Well, the whole thing that this Spectre-tard is telling us is that it ended up in the thigh of Connally at the end.
Correct.
Right? So that's the end point of the magic bullet, according to their very specific and ridiculous diagram. And it ends up in his thigh. So how did it get on a gurney of another person? Shouldn't it? I mean, if it's going to fall out fully intact, you would think that it would fall out at least on the gurney of Connally.
Especially considering they weren't sitting side by side. They were sitting in separate rows of the seating. Like they weren't even side by side. So here's a fun, we'll take a bullet journey here. How about? So the bullet creates this is the official narrative. Okay. It creates an oval shaped entry wound near his right shoulder. It struck and destroyed several inches of Connally's right fifth rib, exited his chest just below his right nipple, puncturing and collapsing his lung. And then that same bullet then entered his arm just above his right wrist and shattered his right radius bone. The bullet then exited just below the wrist at the inner side of his right palm and finally lodged in his left thigh. So there's a nice bedtime story you can tell your kids. The bullet journey. Here's the bullet journey.
Have you guys ever seen that? What's that cartoon? You used to get the Sunday morning comics, out of the newspaper, and you go to Dennis the Menace, and you've got, his mom asks him to go do something, and he goes out the front door, and he goes like up the tree and around and towards this cat,
like
and in the neighbor's yard, through the pool and around. Yeah, and he ends up in the long way, gets to his destination. Well, this is what this bullet did. It's a Sunday morning cartoon.
Magic bullet, Rick.
It's so dumb to think that this bullet is going to be doing 90-degree angles at such a velocity. Like it's physically impossible. It's physically impossible. And I'm going to leave it with that.
So as we're continuing on, let's just put a pin in that for now.
We're going to put a pin in it.
Yep. So then as the limousine passes by the grassy knoll, which you're going to hear more about this area, Kennedy was then struck a second time by a fatal shot to the head. So this is the probably visual that you've all seen 100 times, where he's getting shot in the head, and that's when he crumples fully into the car. And then you of course see his wife head out the back, and you've got Secret Service people jumping on the car, which we are going to break all that stuff down, and why some of this narrative doesn't make any sense, but we're just kind of sticking with the official narrative for now. So the Warren Commission ends up making no or third bullet, whether this was the second or the third bullet that hit him in the head. They just couldn't figure it out. They had this other perfect bullet, but so the second strike to Kennedy entered the rear of his head, then passed in fragments through the skull. So that bullet did fragment when it hit the skull, and it created a large, roughly ovular hole on the rear right side of his head, and then it ends up spraying, obviously, blood and fragments all over the place. The blood spatter and all that stuff landed as far away as the following Secret Service car and the motorcycle officers. So they even got blood spatter from way back there. So that tells you that it was coming fast and in a hurry, this bullet.
In the other direction. I can't.
Right.
I'm trying to be good. I've got my handcuffs on over here very politely.
Spoiler alert. We don't think that the bullet came from the way they said it came.
I mean, they're saying, just to lay this out for people, just because it's interesting to see, you've got it coming from behind, right? And it's coming and it hitting him in the upper right rear of his head, and all of that splatter sprayed backwards and landed on the car behind him. So all of velocity is going forward. All of motion is going forward. And then physics tells me that once something's in motion, it's going to continue in that motion, right? Just like when I wreck my car and I continue to go forward and I slam into the windshield if I'm not wearing my seatbelt, right? Or all of the contents of my car is going to hit the front of the car. Anything that's not secured is going to go forward. We know this. This isn't rocket surgery that we're talking about here. We're talking about them shooting him in the back of the head and it spraying backwards. This is the official narrative, just to be clear.
Correct. And they were going at a pretty slow clip. I mean, the motorcade wasn't going super fast.
12 miles an hour.
So yes. So you've got this Secret Service agent who his name was Clint Hill. He was the one that was riding on the running board of the car that was right behind the Kennedy limousine. So he testifies to the Warren Commission that he heard one shot, and then he jumped onto the street and ran forward to the running board of the limousine to protect Kennedy. And then he says that he heard the fatal headshot as he reached their Lincoln, which was approximately 5 seconds after the first shot that he heard. And then it sounds to me like most of the people between, they heard the first shot, and then second and third shots, they couldn't really make out what was the second, what was the third. I don't know if it was because they came that fast, or if it was just because there was so much, screaming and banter going on. But he couldn't tell. But he does know that it was either the second or the third shot that was approximately 5 seconds after the first shot.
If you're going to fire a gun in that area, you're going to get a lot of echo and blowback just because of the amount of buildings that are in there, right? So if anybody's ever fired a weapon, you always get that initial crack, and then you get that long distance,
right?
It has that ricochet effect, those longer
very
things.
Distinct.
So that bullet is going to hit long before you hear the sound in that area, and then it's going to bounce off of the different buildings.
Which should tell you, again, with the Vegas shooting, they picked an area that had these high-rise buildings because of this whole echo effect. This was like the OG of the echo effect. Right. They realized it works so well for this one. Let's keep doing it. Right.
Yeah.
Same way that 2 planes took down 3 towers.
That's right. So they collect 3 bullet casings, which is why we keep saying that they're stuck in this official narrative. The Warren Commission is stuck to have to prove 3 bullets were used. That's
but
all
only
that they
by
get.
one man, because there was a lone gunman. It was a lone gunman. They were very adamant about that. They had their guy,
So
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Their burden of proof is to say that this one dude did it from this one window, and he did it so fast that he was able to reload with a bolt action 3 times and able to get all of those shots on target that quickly. And then
with a moving car that was coming up on an overpass and other obstacles and not hitting anybody else in the crowd, not hitting anybody anywhere.
This is why this is the mother of all conspiracy theories, because you can't even get through the official narrative very far. I mean, we're not even very far into the official narrative. We haven't even gotten to Parkland yet. And you see all of these discrepancies. So powerful.
So then after the fatal headshot, you see in the film, Mrs. Kennedy, she essentially begins climbing onto the limousine's trunk, like she's trying to get out of the car, because I don't know what the Secret Service guy is yelling at her, or there's no audio to it, so you can't really tell
later
exactly
on you find
the exchange.
That Jackie was actually
bailing out onto the trunk.
She was actually trying to get brain matter from. She was in a state of shock. Later on, we find she was trying to actually retrieve portions of his brain from the. And I know that's gruesome, and I apologize, but that's what she was actually going to do. Was trying to retrieve some of that.
So it was actually that Secret Service agent Hill that said essentially she was not climbing out of the car. She was trying to retrieve fragments of her husband's skull off of the trunk. So he jumps onto the limousine's bumper, and then he clung to the car as it exited the Dealey Plaza and sped to Parkland Memorial Hospital. I don't know. I didn't even look to see, was he riding on the car the whole time? Did they stop at some point? I'm not sure if he was on the car. All I know is that in all the footage, he's on the running board that whole time.
He's on the back of the car. They actually have like little feet things, so where he can put his foot on there, and he's holding onto the back, and he's riding that car the whole time. They hit the freeway and they head right to
and they were gone. Like they were, I mean, they didn't even really stop. They slowed down, but I'm not sure. There's discrepancies here too, so I'm not sure. But
did he slow down? Weird.
Did they slow down? I don't know.
Why would the driver
but
slow
it was
down?
almost like they had a target destination. Like they knew that they were actually going to, the hospital. So after Mrs. Kennedy so she ends up going back into her seat. Governor and Mrs. Connolly, they both heard her repeatedly saying, and this is her quote, "They've killed my husband. I have his brains in my hand." And she's like, just like a mantra, saying this over and over and over again, because she is that traumatized. Yeah. So let's do a little bit of some of the aftermath in Dealey Plaza. So as the motorcade leaves Dealey Plaza, some of the witnesses, obviously some of them ran for cover. Others kind of joined the police officers and ran up the grassy knoll because they were looking for the shooter, right? So you have some concerned citizens who maybe knew which direction things had come from. So this is in the official narrative is kind of interesting, that they were all running towards the grassy knoll area, not just the police officers, but there was witnesses, bystanders that were in search of the shooter going up the grassy knoll. There was a picket fence back there, and no shooter was found behind the picket fence. So, which obviously they end up finding him later on, which we kind of already went over. So there was 178 witnesses who testified to the Warren Commission after the fact. 78 of them were unsure of the shot's origin. 49 believed that they came from the depository, and 21 thought that they came from the grassy knoll. So that was the breakdown of where people thought that the shots were coming from. So it was kind of, a mixed bag, I guess.
Yeah, and it would be, again, when you have the echoes and everything like that, people are going off of what they heard in the moment.
Right.
And if there was another shooter on the grassy knoll, then obviously those people running in the direction of that where that sound came from, they're probably going that way for a reason, right? I mean, they're
your
not just
instinct would be to
up.
run to where you hear the loudest sound, right? That would be the thing that would get your attention immediately, would be the loudest sound, and then followed by the ricochets. So that just the fact that they were headed towards the grassy knoll is sus.
Yeah, and I'm just going to do a shout out to my Texans, because good on you for running at the shooter, right?
I know.
They just ran right at him. They were like, let's get him. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So
obviously, no witnesses saw anybody over there, like actually physically saw a person with or without a gun. They didn't see anybody over there. But Lee Bowers, who was in a 2-story railroad switch tower. So this tower is like 120 yards behind the grassy knoll picket fence. He's watching the motorcade from this 2-story railroad tower. And as he's watching the motorcade, he has like an unobstructed view, is what they said, of the only route by which any shooter could flee the grassy knoll. And he saw no one leaving the scene. So interesting. Keep that in mind for later on.
Okay.
So he ended up testifying later on at the Warren Commission that 1 or 2 men were between him and the fence during the assassination. One was a familiar parking lot attendant, and the other one wore a uniform like a county courthouse custodian. So very specific. These were the only 2 people that I saw in this area during the assassination. One guy, I know him because he's the parking lot attendant, and the other one was dressed as a county courthouse custodian. And those were the only 2 people that were even visible from this guy's tower where he was watching it from, that were, around that area.
Sure. So
he ended up testifying that he saw some commotion on the grassy knoll at the time of the assassination, and then something out of the ordinary, a sort of milling around, but something occurred in this particular spot which was out of the ordinary, which attracted my eye for some reason which I could not identify. So there was some kind of scuffle, there was some kind of, and is that these men that run over there looking for the assailant? Don't know, but something out of the ordinary, a sort of milling around. That doesn't sound like a bunch of, concerned men, like you just shot my president, trying to find somebody. So the whole thing is just so odd. It's just so odd. So then at 12:36, there is a teenager named Amos Eunice. So he approached the Dallas Police Sergeant D.V. Harkness, and he wanted to report seeing, and I quote, a colored man leaning out of the window with a rifle on the 6th floor of the depository during the assassination. Yeah. Okay. So in response to that, which obviously 12:36 is right after this happened, and so in response to that, Harkness then radios it in, and they seal off the depository at that point. And Rick is having a coughing fit.
And I'm back. What happened?
You okay there, man?
I guess.
Okay.
Power through. Here we go.
All right. Let's do a little. There we go. See his cute little.
Let's just clear it out.
Hot pink. That's so fringy cup.
It helps me to drink cool liquid to help my throat.
Oh, and I drink my orange juice out of my That's So Fringy cup.
Looky there.
Look at that. We're not even sponsored, and we're so good at this. Anyway, so that's when they seal off the depository building. So then there was another witness, Howard Brennan. He approaches a police inspector to report seeing a shooter, a white man in khaki clothing, in the same window. So this also just shows you what trauma can do to people, right? It splinters people off. It fractures your mind enough that one guy says he saw a colored man leaning out of the window with a rifle, and the other guy says no, it was a white guy wearing khaki clothing. So obviously you get witness statements that are all over the place, but these are two, wildly different people that these people saw. So they broadcast Brennan's description of the man at 12:45. So at 12:36, they radio in colored man on the 6th floor, and then here, not even 11 minutes later, they radio in, no, it's a white guy in the same building, and he's wearing khakis. So, and then, there was witness James Worrell Jr. He saw a gun barrel emerge from the 6th floor depository window. Bonnie Ray Williams. So this gal, she's on the 5th floor of the depository. She stated that the rifle's rapport. Is that how you say that?
Rapport. Yeah, the sound.
Report was so loud and near that the ceiling plaster fell onto their head.
Wow.
So I don't know how much of the concussion of a firearm, I've only obviously shot them outdoors, so I don't know what it would do inside of a building, especially a building like this that's probably, lath and plaster. It's not probably sheetrock yet, I don't know. Right. But apparently the plaster fell from the ceiling. So then when they're searching on the 5th floor, yeah.
Okay.
So then they're searching the 6th floor of the depository, which is where all, these witnesses said that this rifle barrel appeared out the window.
Right.
So they found an Italian Carsano, I'm not sure, M91/38 bolt action rifle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to make a lot more sense to those of you out there that know guns. But that was the weapon that they ended up finding. So then they obviously track that back. Oswald had purchased this rifle. So he got it in March, and he actually used the alias A. Hidell, Hidell. And he had it delivered to his Dallas P.O. box. So forensically, the FBI ends up finding Oswald's partial palm print on the barrel, and fibers on the rifle were consistent with those of Oswald's shirt.
Which would be the case if he actually owned it, right?
Correct. They found some forensic evidence of Oswald on this rifle, and it was his. So it was a legally purchased rifle, but not legally because he used an alias. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it was pretty damning evidence that it would be sitting right there at that particular moment.
So then, like we said, they ended up finding the bullet on the gurney, and then there was 2 more fragments found in the limousine, and those were all ballistically matched to this rifle. Is it Carsano? How do you say that? Carcano. Carsano?
I'm not sure. Carsano, I think.
Carsano. Which one sounds better?
I don't know. That sounds really fancy to me.
Carsano.
Oh, Carsano. Yes.
Carsano.
I like that.
So Oswald ends up leaving the depository. He travels by bus back to his boarding house where he's obviously living. He ends up getting a jacket and a revolver. And then at 1:12, police officer J.D. Tippett, who we mentioned earlier, he spots Oswald walking in like a residential neighborhood off of the, Oak Cliff area. So he calls him over to his patrol car, obviously, because this big thing had just happened. After an exchange of words, then Tippett exited his vehicle. I don't really know what the exchange of words was. I'm sure it's somewhere in some paperwork that nobody has put the right FOIA in for. But so Tippett ends up getting out of his vehicle, and then Oswald shoots him 3 times in the chest. So then as Tippett's laying on the ground, Oswald then walks over and fires a final shot into Tippett's right temple. Then Oswald calmly walks away before...
Into his right temple? So
he walks away all calm. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, are you drawing lines here?
No,
are you making parallels in your brain?
I might have
like
been
a beautiful mind in there that's got like strings and tacks?
I don't know about
That's what my brain is doing.
It's wild. It's wild in there.
It's wild. It's
where the wild things grow, to be honest.
That's true. So Oswald calmly walks away, and then he starts running like as witnesses emerge. So as people start coming out, because it's a residential neighborhood, as people start coming out, then he takes off running. They did that. They then did. The Dallas police officers did a roll call of the depository employees, right? So Oswald's supervisor is Roy Truly, and he's the one that realizes Oswald's absent.
Oswald, the guy that doesn't even work
Oswald's
here.
absent.
He's absent.
Who's Oswald is probably what he said. So he then notifies the police that it was Oswald in the book depository with the rifle.
With the Carzano. What is
it?
Carzano. The Carzano. Got him. Guys, this is literally, when he's shooting Tippit is 12 minutes after Kennedy is pronounced officially dead, right, to the world. Mm-hmm. This is when they officially announce it. 12 minutes. This guy's on. He's already supposedly shot the president. And the thing that he wants to do now is... And
gone back to the boarding house.
Right.
He had to get his jacket. Don't forget.
He had to get his jacket and his pistola. Because, when you're... After you just got done murdering the president, you need your jacket. Sometimes
seems like you would be chilly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be worked up.
Maybe he was
at
trying
all,
to disguise himself, right?
Could
so
be,
he's running off with this thing 12 minutes after they've said the president's dead. And does he know? I don't know. Probably not. If he's involved, does he know that they've announced it yet? Does he know that he's dead?
I don't know.
So now you've got a guy on the run, this official narrative, and he gets into this altercation with a police officer. He decides to shoot him in broad daylight in front of a residential neighborhood full of people. Yeah. And then run off to a...
Right. So then at 1:36, the police were called after a conspicuous Oswald, who was tired from running, was seen sneaking into the Texas Theater without paying.
What?
How dare him? How dare him? He gets into the theater without paying. So, ironically, the film War is Hell is playing. And then Dallas policemen then go in and arrest Oswald after a brief struggle in which Oswald drew his fully loaded gun.
That he pulled out of his jacket.
He pulled out of his jacket from the boarding house. So obviously he denies shooting anyone, claims he was being made a patsy because he lived in the Soviet Union. So here we go back to the Soviet Union, which we'll get into a little bit because there was a lot of stuff politically that was going on that involved the Soviet Union. But for sake of time, let's just do a little bit more on that day, and then we're going to pick it up next time with politically what was going on and what were some contributing factors and why this Oswald thought he was being targeted because he'd lived in the Soviet Union. But let's finish out this part. So 12:38 is when Kennedy arrives at the emergency room at the hospital. He was still breathing after the shooting, and his personal physician, who was George, immediately saw that survival was impossible. After Parkland surgeons performed futile cardiac massage, Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1 p.m., 30 minutes after the shooting. And you can actually go on and find this footage of CBS host Walter Cronkite as he broke the news on live television, and he is shook.
Folks. Yeah, he's going to cry. He's like about to cry.
So obviously, because of the head wound, Kennedy had gone into cardiac arrest because... your brain, that's your computer chip. So he was having some trouble there. So he went into cardiac arrest. They tried doing cardiac massage, which if you've never seen this, it's basically where they like rip your entire chest open and put their hands into your body cavity and manually massage your heart to try to get it beating again. So I'm assuming they had probably used paddles and probably done all of that stuff to begin with, but they did end up opening him up and trying to do the cardiac massage that way. So then the Secret Service, it says that they're concerned about the possibility of a larger plot, obviously. So they kind of urged Johnson to leave Dallas and, head back to the White House. Johnson had initially refused to do so without any proof of Kennedy's death. So he was like, I'm not getting on this plane and getting sworn in as the president while were they in the air still? Or were they at the airfield when Johnson gets sworn in as president?
Yeah, they
were in the air. No, they couldn't have been because Jackie was there.
They were on the tarmac on Air Force One. But before that,
they weren't in the air yet.
They had the body of John F. Kennedy was now pronounced, and he wanted to move on. He being Lyndon B. Johnson wanted to move on and get onto the plane, but Jacqueline Kennedy didn't want to leave the side of her husband, and so the idea was as if Lyndon B. Johnson was getting out of there, he was going to have to take this body with him. And that's what they wanted to do anyway, because it was the president of the United States. And in their mind,
they didn't want to leave him at this Dallas hospital. Obviously.
Yeah, this is a federal situation, and we need to investigate this federally, which of course they would. But the coroner, the Dallas coroner was like, no, this is a murder in Dallas County. We are doing the autopsy.
It becomes one of those weird, like, who has jurisdiction type of things, because it's a federal crime, but it's done in the city limits of Dallas. So then it falls under their jurisdiction. So it was kind of a nightmare for a little bit as far as
how are we going to do this? What's going to happen?
Yeah, how are we going to do this? Where do we take him? Where do we put him? It was just kind of
whirlwind.
It was an odd, and I felt really bad for his wife because she just looked like she was just like, she's like glazed over, and I just can't even imagine what that would have been like.
Well, she didn't want him to be pronounced dead until the priest was there, and that was very important to her because they were Catholic and
And that then held up Johnson from leaving because he didn't want to leave until he knew for sure that he was dead, and so it was kind of this like dominoes of oddities that kind of happened right after that. So let's see, Johnson then he gets on Air Force One around 1:30, and then he ended up getting a phone call from a couple of their advisors that said, leave for Washington DC immediately, he's dead. And so he said, and at that point was when he said, I'm not going to leave without Jacqueline Kennedy. And then she was like, I'm not leaving without my husband's body. So that was that ripple effect that happened. According to Esquire, Johnson did not want to be remembered as an abandoner of beautiful widows.
Oh my gosh.
What a freaking weird thing to say. Like,
that dude's such a turd.
In a newspaper article that Johnson supposedly said he did not want to be remembered as an abandoner of beautiful widows. Yeah,
what an idiot.
I just thought that was so weird.
What about the president's body? Like, you don't want to be an abandoner of the president's body.
I don't want to abandon. Yeah. Well, let's remember the beautiful widow. Let's not remember our president that was just shot. Right.
Let's be clear.
Yeah. So there ended up being kind of a heated exchange between, Kennedy's aides and then the Dallas officials, like so much so that it almost like came to a fist fight. Like they were just trying to figure out before basically the Texans yielded and allowed Kennedy's body to leave.
Yeah, the one Secret Service agent actually picked up under the armpits the Dallas coroner and moved him physically out of the way and said, "We're leaving." And then
we're taking him and we're leaving.
They took the body around, I think it was like 2:04 or something like that. He was in the ambulance. He was already in a casket, and this is important for the narrative.
This is very weird, and yes, keep this in mind for later on. He was transported from the hospital to the tarmac in a casket, correct?
Yeah. Yes. And it's like a brownish kind of burgundy, a nicer looking casket, one that you would see.
It was pretty.
Yeah. A normal casket that you would see somebody in, with the top.
Like you go to the funeral home and you pick that out later on. You don't transport a body that's just been through and hasn't been autopsied yet. Yeah. Like there's very specific chain of custody things that have to happen for a body. Like it just is very weird. So at 2:38. Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me. No, I was just going to say, so he's in this casket and they take him through the back channels. They get him on there and they're beelining it to the airport because they have to get on the planes and get out of there.
Right.
And
everybody's saying, you guys got to leave Dallas now. So then at 2:38 with Jackie Kennedy by his side. Johnson is then administered the oath of office. And I haven't actually run this by you, but is it weird that there happened to be a federal judge there to administer? Because it can't just be anybody that administers the oath of office, right? It has. So there happens to be federal judge Sarah Tillman Hughes, who's on board Air Force One, and basically swears him into office.
That's interesting.
With
How
Kennedy's
did she
coffin.
get there?
He's there at that time.
Yeah. And the fact that you're making his wife, and this is just sick to me, but when you go through the narrative and we get to the end of this, we're going to realize how gross this is, that they're making her stand there. It gets
sicker.
They're making her stand there after her husband's just been murdered and be a political puppet, basically, because what Lyndon B. Johnson wants in this moment is he wants the American people to see him as a legit president.
Right. And that he's supported by the Kennedys. You know, she's what's left of the Kennedy not royal family. What do
legacy,
they call it?
Yeah. This whole presidential legacy. And so he wants her to be there to show the support for him, which is gross.
Smile for the camera.
Yeah, in that moment. This is not about you right now at this moment, dude. Like she's having a hard time right now. You should let her just go be with her husband's body and just grieve. But no, they have to do this freaking dog and pony show on Air Force One. He had to be, because they were, how they do. It's national security. I have to be the president right now. Whereas they already have a chain of command. They already have he doesn't need to be sworn in right now. That's not how it works.
And it wasn't just that he was like sworn in. It was like, I mean, they gathered photographers, it was this whole like dog and pony show. It wasn't just like Rick said, there is protocol for if the president is assassinated, obviously the vice president is going to be the acting president at that point, right? So this
already
whole
in the policy.
thing, it's already written out. Everybody already knows that. So why did they happen to have a federal judge that just so happened to be able to swear him into office on the tarmac on Air Force One with Jackie Kennedy and JFK in a coffin?
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
It's just
okay. So we have a lot more to go over with the autopsy, but I'm just going to do a really quick browse over and then we'll be done for this episode.
Let's do it.
So President Kennedy's autopsy ends up being performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital, which is in Maryland. It's on the night of November 22nd. Jacqueline Kennedy, so she had selected the Naval Hospital as the post-mortem site as President Kennedy had been a naval officer, obviously, during World War II. So at some point they must have asked her, where do you want us to take his body? I'm not sure. Or if they just said, we're going to take him to Bethesda Naval Hospital. Is that okay? Like, I don't really know how that obviously went down, but he ends up at Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland. Then there's 3 physicians that are, and again, this is according to the official narrative. Keep that in mind. So there's 3 physicians that are conducting the autopsy. Naval commanders James Humes and J. Thornton Boswell. So those are the 2 naval commanders. And then they have the assistance of a ballistics wound expert, Pierre Fink. But it was Humes that was leading the procedure. But those were the 3 physicians that were there. And then it says a little bit further down, it says, under pressure from the Kennedy family and White House staffers to expedite the procedure, the physician conducted a rushed and incomplete autopsy. So the Kennedy family, it's quite obvious what he died of. He was shot, right? So we already know that he's, died from a gunshot wound to the head or the throat or both or whatever you want to say. Why do you think that there was pressure from the Kennedy family and the White House staffers to expedite the autopsy on the president? Like, shouldn't this be done in a very methodical, like dot your I's and cross your T's? Like, you're going to do it by the book. I guess I just don't understand why they were trying to expedite, or was that just something that they put in there for funsies? What do you think?
Yeah, it's very hard for me to think that the Kennedys would want it to be expedited. You would think that if your brother / husband / whatever nephew, you would think that if he was just murdered, you would want a detailed and long investigation.
I don't care how long it takes you. You guys can be up all night if you have to. I want to know exactly what happened. But so don't rush through my husband's autopsy. I'm putting this on the record right now. Don't rush through my husband's autopsy.
Yeah. If I ever die, guys, Kristin does not want.
We are not rushing.
We're not rushing an autopsy with Rick. Let's just be clear.
Nope.
So this is a suspect thing.
Yes, it is. And, keep that in mind, obviously, for later. But it ended up being Kennedy's personal physician, Rear Admiral George Berkeley, who signed the death certificate on November 23rd. And at that point, once you sign the death certificate, so you can have whoever Joe Schmo fill it out, but once you, as the physician, sign the death certificate, then that becomes the official cause of death. So the official cause of death was listed as a gunshot wound to the skull. 3 years after the autopsy, Kennedy's brain, which had been removed and preserved for later analysis, weird. This is going to really get you. It was missing. So his actual brain, or what was left of it, was found to be missing when the Kennedy family transferred material to the National Archives. It's gone. It's not there. They can't find his brain. Weird. So conspiracy theorists, I love how they have to put this in when they're tying a nice, pretty bow around this package. So they said then conspiracy theorists often claim that the brain may have shown that the headshot was entered from the front.
Oh, geez.
What? Wait, you mean you can't take a brain and flip it around? It's not the same on both sides? It's not like Rubik's Cube?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So then it's got the assistant to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother. This is what they said. He likely removed the footlocker holding the brain and other materials at his direction, and he either destroyed these materials or otherwise rendered them inaccessible to prevent misuse of said material or to hide the extent of the president's chronic illnesses and consequent medications.
It's so full of crap. It's so ridiculous.
So, and then also ... some autopsy x-rays and photographs have also been lost. Whoops.
So as you guys
we made a boo-boo.
This is like fully suspicious from minute one of this whole thing.
From minute one. Yep.
I mean, it's really off. This whole thing is really off. And we're going to get into the scope of how off it really is. And it's going to blow your mind. Because the official narrative is telling you right now that there is one shooter and 3 bullets. And one of those bullets has some magical properties that can make it do all kinds of crazy things.
And can make it reform into a perfect magic bullet.
We already have all of the doctors at Parkland got a very good look at everything that was going on with him. Got a very good look at his skull, got a very good look at his neck wound, got a very good look at all of that. And they were able to see and document in a very professional way. You have to remember, these guys are dealing with the president of the United States. This day changed their lives.
If you don't think that those guys puckered up their butt a little bit when they realized they had to fill out all this paperwork for the president of the United States that just got shot on their shift, these guys were doing everything by the book. Like they were keeping track of everything. And then we'll go into on the next episode some of the weirdness that ended up happening with those doctors and more about the autopsy stuff.
Yeah, it's a wild ride, guys, and we just only begun. And the reason that we're doing this in 3 parts is because there is so much. And so, obviously, this one, some of you may have been bored and been like, guys, we already know all of this. Well, you have to consider that this was a long time ago. This is 60 years ago. And there's a lot of people that don't remember these intricate details, and so as we begin to build this narrative and then break apart the narrative, you can't really break apart the narrative if you can't remember what actually the official narrative is. And so that's why we like to do it this way, to build this scaffolding so that we can begin to then go into the conspiracy things and the reasons why we believe that this was set up by the government to orchestrate a hit on our own president, which is just
and just when you guys hear some of the stuff politically that was going on at that time with him, specifically with him and the Soviet Union, which is and Cuba. Obviously, you've got Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that stuff, and smashed in there too. It's a nice Kennedy sandwich.
Yeah, Kennedy had a lot of opposition coming his way. I mean, from the minute that he got into office, he was public enemy number one because he wanted to change the world. He didn't want to change America. He's
this young guy that's vibrant, and you've got all these old crotchety politicians that were probably like, "Oh, who's the new guy in town? You don't know anything about this place." And I imagine that what it would have been like back then.
Yeah, but that
we weren't obviously alive at that time, so we had to lay the groundwork of the official narrative, just so that we all know, did not pay attention in school at all. So
not me.
I'm not even sure how I passed my history test, but I did. So congratulations to the school district. You guys squeaked one through. Because I don't really remember hardly anything. So it was
Kristin should not have graduated. Let's be clear. She should not have graduated.
What? But then I went to nursing school, and what happened? I graduated with honors from nursing school, but I didn't go till I was 30. So I actually cared about the school at that time, and I was paying for it. So
that's right.
A little different motivation, I guess.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this, kind of laying the groundwork, laying the foundation of what we're going to be doing and talking about for the next 2 episodes. And let's just say it's only going to get better from here. You guys are going to be shocked and appalled at all of the things that are actually out there. The amount of evidence that is piled up against this Warren Commission and these people and all their lies and all of their deceit and all of that, it's all there. You just got to dig. And we have. Guess what? We have the benefit of it being 60 years later. So there have been a lot of people that have filled out those FOIA forms, and they've been able to get a lot of stuff. But same with all of these other false flags we've done, guys. Most of this stuff is redacted. So if you want to go on and read thousands of pages of all of this, it's there, but it's so tedious because it's so heavily redacted. It would be like, blank walked up to blank at blank time, and they do that on purpose. But there's enough information if you know what you're looking for to find it. Yep. And we're going to get into it
of having technology and being 60 years later.
That's right. So guys, stay tuned. Thank you for hanging out with us. We know that, sometimes this can be mind numbing, trying to remember all this information and getting into that. We're trying to give it to you in bite-sized pieces so that you can digest it, figure it out. Yeah. Come next week, we're going to have a lot more. So be ready, because we're going to get into the political side of things and what the climate looked like at that time and how it is that we got to this point. So with that, we are That's So Fringy podcast, and we are going to get out of here, but we will see you guys on the next. But until then, stay fringy, my friends.